Are you willing to accept Christ's invitation to know Him more intimately, love Him more intensely, and follow Him more closely, and then go out into the world and live His good news? If you say yes, then you could be the 13th apostle. Join Tom Caffrey to share the goodness, beauty, and truth of Jesus Christ and His church. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the 13th apostle.
When Pope John Paul II visited Ireland very early in his pontificate, more than a quarter of the population of the entire island and more than a third of the population of the Republic attended the opening mass at Dublin's Phoenix Park. More than half the entire population, or roughly 2.7 million, somewhere around there, turned out to greet the Pope during his visit. One could justifiably conclude that the Irish were as Catholic as ever. Truth, however, told a different story. Openness to the world, an economic boon, and cultural shocks were changing the people and the church, often not for the better. While the decline in the church after Vatican II was rapid throughout the Western world, it was very arguably most dramatic in Ireland, a Catholic nation. The church in the United States convulsed shortly after the Second Vatican Council, owing mainly to the evolving secularism as part of the sexual and cultural revolution of the 60s and the 70s. It suffered similarly to Ireland, significantly from its own sins. But the story doesn't end there. They quote from C.S. Lewis, of all people, from his book Mere Christianity. Just as critics of the church are patting down the earth on its grave, they suddenly hear that it is still alive and has ever broken out in some new place. Welcome back, friends, to another episode of the 13th Apostle, where we explore the good, the beautiful, and the true, or we look for it, of the Catholic faith and the church. This is Tom Caffrey, and joining me to discuss Catholicism in Ireland and, to a lesser extent, in the United States is Robert Nugent of the podcast De Crevi. Robert Nugent, welcome to the 13th Apostle.
It's a pleasure to be on, and it's great to meet somebody with such a famous surname like yourself that is from where I'm from.
That is wonderful. I'm so glad we have this preserved on in recording, so I can let people know that don't think I'm famous, to let them know that there is fame in my blood. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So to our friends in the audience, I was telling Robert before that my father, his family's from County Meath. Well, he proceeded to say how many Caffreys he knows. And my mother, her maiden name is Caffrey. But
Oh,
I don't think, as far as I know, she's from Cork. Her family's from Cork.
okay. Yes.
I'll have to double check that, but I'm 99% sure she's from the Cork area. And I know my
Yeah.
father's family's from Meath.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's
do
interesting.
Meathians and Corkians, do they historically get along?
Yeah, I mean, there was movement of people around Ireland anyway, so surnames are not very static, but Caffrey is a very well-known surname from where I grew up. It's not very well known where I currently live now, which is in Mayo, about 3 hours away from Meath. But where I grew up, I remember lots of Caffreys, so I'm not surprised that your family is from there.
That's amazing. So if I go there and let's say I go and I meet you and you're in Mayo, you said, right?
Yeah.
Is it possible we could like turn that around a little bit so that some of what is known in Meath could be known in Mayo with the Caffrey clan?
Absolutely, yes, no problem.
I want fame, not infamy. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah. You visit lots of shops over in Meath that carried their name Caffrey's. I remember a few shops, a few families that had shops that were called Caffrey's. So there's definitely you'll definitely find a lot of connections there.
any discounts? Or is it too
I'm
common?
sure. I'm sure you can. Once you claim the long lost Irish relative, you'll get a cup of tea at least.
That's wonderful. So tell us about yourself, your life, your certainly your faith, the faith aspect of it, but not just that.
Yeah, so I'm from County Meath, on the border of County Meath. My family comes from a town called Delvin, which is in Westmeath, and where I'm the 32nd generation Nugent. We came to Ireland with the Normans many centuries ago. kind of turned Anglo-Irish, even though Normandy isn't really Anglo. It's in Normandy, so descended from the Vikings
Ah,
many centuries prior to that. So a long history there, and kind of rooted in that part of Ireland for centuries. Grew up there, went to school in Athboy, a little town, and then went to at 18 joined the Legionaries of Christ. Went to seminary, novitiate in Italy, seminary studies in Italy and Spain. Didn't think it was my vocation and left after about 8.5 years in 1999. And then met my beautiful wife, Kinga, who is from Poland. And we have three beautiful children. And for the last 25 years, I've been working with an American multinational and enjoying life here in Ireland and with the family. And over the last 5 years, especially since COVID, started the podcast, De Crevi. It's it's the family motto. It's what Prince Lavelle Nugent used when he returned Pope Paul VII to Rome after the Napoleon captivity, when he defeated Napoleon's brother-in-law Murat at the Battle of Magliano, south of Monte Cassino, just below Monte Cassino, where Pope Leo was just a few days ago. We have deep ties to our deep Catholic roots in our family. A Jesuit, Robert Nugent, was the head of the Jesuits in Ireland during the Reformation. We were some of the first Nugents to give up everything, leave Ireland during the Catholic persecution under Queen Elizabeth, and her father were directly related to Queen Elizabeth at the time through her mother's family, because of intermarriage, really, because of a Norman family, and so were they. We were the first to write an English-Irish dictionary and taught Queen Elizabeth Irish at the time, which she did speak to some extent, because we were wards of King Henry, who would take the firstborn Norman boys to stop the Irish families rebelling. So, but the faith was incredibly important, and they gave up everything to defend the faith, estates, families, lands, everything. Went into exile to Spain and Italy, rather than renege the faith. So there's many different stories touching on the Catholic faith in my family. One of them was during the time, and this is probably one of the interesting ones, we found out in Delvin there was a Eucharistic miracle where the Nugents go in with the Bishop of Ardagh to celebrate Mass in their chapel, in the Nugent Chapel in Delvin, and they find a host in a chalice on an altar that the priest had left from a previous Mass. And when the bishop goes to try and take the host, it was moving from one side of the altar. Nobody could actually touch the host, so they had to get the priest who said Mass to come and collect the host. This is documented in a
wow.
book. They must have witnessed this Eucharistic miracle. The host, that exact host, was actually taken to France later on by an Irish priest who went into exile. So there were miracles during the time of persecution, kind of to confirm people's faith, so that all wasn't lost. So lots of different stories and different centuries of our family. But I suppose, when we saw the nonsense during COVID, I started blocking. So that's really where I stepped in to kind of take up my role in my generation to defend what previous generations held sacred and true, and the faith that they defended for so long.
That's a noble struggle, just in light of my introduction with the big changes in Ireland. And by the way,
Yeah.
when we, in the intro and in other sources, there was a frequent reference to Ireland and to the island. So, okay, well, the island is the North and the Republic. How do you distinguish it, and how do the Irish distinguish the two nations? If you say Ireland, what do you mean? Is it the Republic? Is that what it really means for most people?
No, as a Catholic, as obviously, whenever we say island, Ireland, we mean the island. I mean the Church, the Catholic Church, encompasses the whole the island of Ireland as such. So we don't say, oh, the Northern Irish Church or the Southern Irish Church. There's only one Catholic Church in Ireland, and it has dioceses across Ireland. So for me, whenever I say Ireland, and most Catholics would mean this, we are referencing the island. That's what we
Oh.
and there isn't really any border. Like if you're driving, which I frequently do up to the north, there's no border. You wouldn't even know you're crossing into Northern Ireland. So the checkpoints are gone, the border crossings are gone. It's all very peaceful at the moment. So yeah,
It's interesting you brought that up with the border because, we'll get to the how you and I have come to meet, because as the regular listeners of the program, they know that my son Kevin is on a pilgrimage and started at the Shetland Islands, and now he's in somewhere in England. I told Robert that he's had amazing experiences, encounters with people, just beautiful relationships that have formed friendships. And there's this one group of women that he refers to, and I don't know whether he initiated, I'll have to find out from Kevin whether he initiated this, but he referred to as the Irish Mammies. And I think there's about five of them, five of these women who they've just developed a fondness for each other, for the women and Kevin. And one of them introduced Kevin, I think, to your name or to your program, your podcast, and you have a YouTube presence, and so that's how Kevin got me your contact information that he got from that particular woman. Do you remember that woman's name by any chance?
yeah, Kay Downey.
Kate, that's
Yeah,
it.
she was just helping us with the walk to knock from Dublin. So she
Oh.
lent her a few days. She's an amazing woman, buying Bibles and doing all sorts. A woman of a lot of faith, definitely. So he was privileged to meet her. So he was.
Oh, yes, he would second that immediately. He's talked a lot about her. So, and Kevin said that, in fact, I was talking with him one time on a video call, and he said, Dad, I think I've crossed the border into the
Yeah,
Republic. And then he's looking around, and he finally found the sign that, an old sign. So I remember when I was over in Ireland in the 80s, mid 80s. I was surprised about the streets, the directional signs to see the Gaelic. Now, is it the Gaelic or the Irish? And are they
Irish,
synonymous?
Irish. No,
Irish.
we would just say Irish. Yeah, so you have dual signage, Irish and English, in the Republic, and in some places in the north, depending on which part of the north it is.
And the names phonetically, they were this almost the same. Spelling was
No, no. Dublin, for example, in English, in Irish would be Balliaha Clia, which would be completely different.
oh, there's
Yeah.
a sign that I just saw, and I do remember this from when I was driving around Ireland. I guess I should say some. I know it seemed like many of the signs had very similar. There were usually two words, one word in English,
Yeah.
McKinnon, but that would be two words in the Irish, and it was something might have been a C instead of a K. I wish I could think of the town or the town what I was just looking at before we got on the air. It did make driving around. I had no trouble driving around
Yeah.
Ireland. It was arguably the easiest driving experience I had, and I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about I mentioned it because you're doing noble work. You're doing God's work in the face of what the decline that you know better than I in your country. What is it like for you? How much of the decline of the church have you experienced? And then how is it that what you're doing is in your small way to counter that change in the church?
I don't know if I'm doing anything really apart from just blogging about my own experience, but it's only as you get older you definitely do see the massive societal changes. And I wasn't blogging at all for many number of years until I'd say about 2018, 2019, things started to change a lot. 2018, we had the abortion referendum, right? So unlike the United States, where it was your Supreme Court that passed Roe v. Wade, and then that kind of cascaded around the states. You never had in the 1960s or 70s, you never had a national referendum on abortion in the states, right? In Ireland, we did. So in 2018, it was a popular vote. The question was put to people, and there was a massive manipulation of Irish media by American left-wing movements, George Soros and others, a massive push to manipulate people into voting for abortion, especially using, soft logic, some of the rare exceptions, etc., to justify what was ushered in, and it was extremely sad to see, 2/3 of the Irish population, most of them Catholics, voting for this and celebrating it. That was,
Mm.
so, I mean, it was a sea change. We had the same-sex referendum, gay marriage, 3 years previously in 2015.
Right.
Abortion was more popular than same-sex marriage,
Mm.
so that people can understand that, that it was the one of the most heavily funded and most debated referendums, and so that was the legislation that was passed in 2018 to allow abortion on demand in Ireland. So you had the first year of abortions was 2019 because the legislation came into effect that year, and in 2020, early 2020, the first figures came out, and it was 6,666 abortions. That exact number of abortions. That was it.
Oh my.
More demonic you couldn't invent. Actually, those figures came out just about when the pandemic was starting, so just when the world was going a bit crazy. There was abortion before the referendum. There was about 2,000 a year, so that women would travel to the UK to get them. But with the referendum, that increased threefold, and then it's gone up to 10,000 plus a year. You just see this absolute sea change in people's attitudes. Life means very little, and now we see the invasion of euthanasia
Mm.
across Europe. It's been debated in England, it's been passed in the UK and other countries. And then obviously we have uncontrolled mass immigration. Again, I've nothing against any human being. Every human being is created in the likeness and image of God. We should treat them with the Christian respect that Christ would ask us to do. But there also has to be a logical, pragmatic understanding of the effects a tiny nation like Ireland will suffer with tens of thousands of people coming into the country. And, in a little Irish town, which 20 years ago was on the west of Ireland, today we have 3 or 4 centres where Middle Eastern, Afghan, Iraqi, Afghanistan, African migrants are processed through centres all across Ireland. It's an industry, and I don't like to be labelled anti-immigrant, but it is putting pressure on all levels of Irish society, especially a group that will never integrate with our culture. They won't eat our food, they won't intermarry, etc., etc. And I don't see how this will pan out in the long run in Ireland. But again, I don't think that they have thought this process through, those that are pushing it through, or maybe they have, and maybe they want it. But anyway, that's just some of the things that Ireland is facing. So we've seen the loss of faith. We've seen the crisis in the church, the Irish church, a little bit like Saint Vincent Ferrer prophesied. When we go towards the end times, we'd see the loss of faith, the fall of the clergy, and then the apostasy in the church. Well, we've seen the loss of faith, we've seen the fall of the clergy, and now we're facing the apostasy within our church, because so much nonsense with synodality. It's quite shocking what has happened to the faith. We had a synodal. Well, it's like every country, they published their synodal synthesis document of all of the stuff that they
Mhm.
gathered in Ireland, and it was like the ape of the church that Fulton Sheen warned about. You're using the structures to push utter nonsense, not a word on abortion. Not a single word on in the synodal nonsense on abortion. Not even nothing. It's as if the church doesn't care one bit whatsoever on the pro-life issue, right? Hindus can defend holy cows, but if Catholics cannot defend the right to life, it is truly sad to see the way the Irish Church moved out. But anyway, that's just, I don't think it's unknown, these things.
You used a great term, soft logic. That was used in the spirit of love.
Yes.
Now, love to have same-sex marriage in the United States. I mean, abortion was fought from 1973, and finally had some victory at the Supreme Court. But if it's all in love, well, how can you be opposed to that? Everything is love, love, love. And that did shape, it was brilliant strategy, and it shaped the populace. And now, well, if it's love, how can you be opposed to it? They're not harming anybody with, now I'm thinking mainly same-sex marriage, but I'm also thinking that, when the church gives up. Losing is kind of passive. Gives up is as active. When a church gives up its morality and its moral standing, and again, this is especially, I don't want to beat up on Ireland. It's just such a stark example of its dominance in the public square and its fall from grace in the public square, where so few, relative to the way it was, listen to the church speaking in the public square. Well, Christ hated hypocrites. And whether or not people follow Christ, they know, certainly people in Ireland in their upbringing, although I know it's from what I've read and heard on podcasts and whatnot, the education of students, youth, by teachers who very often don't believe. Maybe they were unchurched. The children are definitely unchurched. If you give up your faith, if you become a hypocrite, which is what happened with the sex scandal. I mean, obviously it was massive in the United States.
Yeah.
Uh, but not aware, and I'm wondering if you know about this. You may have heard of the Dallas Charter in the United States, and that was in 2002, I believe, in response to when everything hit the fan in the late 90s and 2000. The extent of the sex scandal in the US, the billions that have paid out, instead of going to Peter's Pence, instead of going to the poor, went to settle these cases. While at the same time parishes were consolidating, closing, and whatnot, but the Dallas Charter and then the subsequent charter after that has been a big success in the United States, where the third party, which for the longest time was the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, evaluating the United States Church at the request of the Church, of the USCCB, U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. The third party has shown the dramatic improvement in the reports of credible accusations. The figures have plummeted since the institution of all these guards. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if something similar has happened in the Irish Church.
Oh yeah, but they were dragged kicking and screaming to doing that. There was in Ireland there was an ex-priest. He was a gay ex-priest actually, Pat Buckley, and he used to expose every piece of filth of the Irish church. He's dead about 2 years. He would go after everything, every piece of hypocrisy, even though he had lived it. But I suppose he knew where the dead bodies were lying, and he brought down the head of the Cistercians at one stage because
Oh,
of
wow.
some of the nonsense. Yeah, so the nonsense was being shoved under the carpet, but it wasn't being dealt with. It wasn't being managed, and I suppose the church had to take a step back and had to reform seminary formation. I mean, all of the seminaries in Ireland closed bar one. So we've one diocesan seminary, we have the neo-catechumenal seminary, and that's really it. Because I mean, the formation 10 to 15 years ago was appalling. Any normal straight man was with a minimal level of piety and devotion was just wasn't going to fit in with the liberal nonsense that was being pushed in those seminaries, and a lot of them left. They went off to other seminaries. Some of them went to the Fraternity of St. Peter or to other places
Yes.
where you could get just normal manly priestly formation. Things have changed over the last I would say since COVID, especially, things have changed, and there are some excellent, good priests in Ireland, and but the numbers are very, very, very few. I mean, ordinations in Ireland at one stage during COVID, there was more bishops being ordained in Ireland than diocesan priests.
Wow.
That was the situation. It was the low point, and things are picking up, but. Yeah, I mean, God is allowing all this to happen because you're either going to be for Him or what you stand for, and what Catholics are looking for are authentic men that live the faith, not the fake stuff that was happening in Ireland. And so it's going to take a while for things to renew, but just as things were starting to get up, then we had the nonsense of synodality being pushed, and all the liberals, in charge in the church. The James Martin came to Ireland, and he gave a talk to all of the Irish bishops. He had them in Knock of all places, because these are the men that Rome was allowing to have a voice. Whereas if you asked for anything traditional, it seems that wasn't so much supported. But anyway, look, we live in definitely interesting times in the church, and we just have to know our faith and remain faithful, and see what happens.
Amen. To emphasize that final point, and C.S. Lewis's comment, in the United States, there's areas of bust, the old areas, the Northeast where I am, but in the South, in the West, and it's boom time. So I know you said with humility that you don't know what your program is doing, the goodness of your program, but I'm absolutely certain about the goodness of programs like yours and this one, and that guys like us just keep at it. You're decrevi, right? Determined. We must persevere, and we will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Robert, thank you so much for coming on to the program. It's a real pleasure to meet you, to have this good conversation. I'm confident we've just scratched some of the surface, so I hope we can do this again. I would love to have you back on.
It's a pleasure. Absolutely. Hoping to touch base again.
Wonderful. Friends, that was Robert Nugent of Decrevi, and it's both a podcast and a YouTube channel, right, Robert?
That's it, yeah.
Okay. So stay tuned for the Angelus, followed by Your Prayer Intentions, wqphradio.org. Thanks for your support, friends. We need it. We support each other. Robert and I are supporting each other, and we need your support as well. So thank you for all that you've done, Mary Ann, Jean, and James, and the crew. Thank you. God bless you, Robert.
God bless.
Thank you for listening to The 13th Apostle with Tom Caffrey. Tom's website is faithpilgrims.com, or email trcaffrey@faithpilgrims.com. How about you? Will you be the 13th Apostle?